Welcome, everybody, to ZEN Hustlers Balance podcast. My name is Jared Brick, the founder and creator of ZEN Hustlers. It was started to help empower people, professionals, high impact people who are working, but feel a sense of out of balance, whether that's stress, overwhelm, anxiety, and just that inner knowledge of like something's off and I need to get back in tune with that. So what we say is it's balance on the edge. And the edge is being, again, highly productive, highly impactful, and wanting to make a big impact with your work in the world. I went through my own personal hustle journey, starting back when I started the company in 2013. My business is media company. And 2017, I went through a very difficult personal journey. And everything on the zenhustlers.com website is a resource that helped me personally come through that. And I'm using that word not out of it, but through it. It's a process and it's an adventure. And during COVID, we started talking to people who are walking the talk. Professionals who have been through a journey and they want to give back with the work that they do in the world and share some insights from what they've been through. So today I couldn't be more excited to introduce a former colleague and client of mine that we helped her build out her initial brand at lumierework.com. So welcome, Kathleen Joy. Thank you for joining me. I can't wait to talk today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to see you again and to talk about. I love the Zen Hustle. So ready to go. I feel like the whole thing is devoted to your content, your topic.
Kathy, like me, has a last name that really represents her. I'm last name of Brick and she's last name of Joy. When you get to meet her and work with her, she is a pure joy. One of my favorite experiences in working with any client.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, she is a CEO, an executive leadership coach, now an author. We're going to dive into her book, and an amazing artist. Tell me about your art. What's your favorite medium of art? Let's kick it off there.
You know, I like to have choice. So one of them, I do a lot of painting, and that's usually when I need like clarity of thought, because when you enter a canvas, you do not know what's going to happen. There's something about going into the unknown. And then as it starts to come to shape and form and you see it progress over time, the clarity comes out. It's like, oh, that's what wants to emerge. And so working with canvas is always a great way for me to reinstall my faith.
Did it start with a brush? Well, what's the ideal thing in your hand?
Oh, I use mixed medium. So sometimes it's brush, hands, materials. This one, that's one of my pieces there. That's actually with some sand in it.
Oh, cool.
It all depends what the mood is.
Tell us a little bit about your journey as a executive leadership coach, and we're going to get into some of the other things also. So tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
Well, it kind of happened because I was getting out of balance with my life, right? So when I first started, I was consulting and I was creating workshops. I was doing all this research, but I was traveling like 100,000 miles a year on a plane. And I wanted to have a family. And, the very practical thing is you have to be in the same room with your spouse to start, right? So it was like, this is not going to work. And so the last project I was working on was teaching leaders how to become coaches within their organizations. And then all of a sudden it was like one of those moments. It's like, well, why am I not doing this? So that's how I started the practice.
And just to mention, you have 2 daughters that are out in the world and college and past college. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really happy because they're good people.
What drives you in the executive leadership coaching world? How did that call to you?
I want people to be awake at the wheel. I want them to be fully resourced. Leaders impact a lot of people's lives. They can impact either a person or a team or a department, a whole organization, a whole ecosystem, right? And so I want those people to be awake, healthy, aware of what they're doing so that the things that can happen, the unforeseen consequences can get minimized.
Got it. And would you call that a top-down approach? If you start from the top, it all flows down the hill?
Well, I think that leaders tend to set the tone in the culture. Their values and their behavior are, they set the tone. So it's like we were talking about the canvas earlier. If I start with a certain background, that's going to be the predominant thing that keeps coming through. And that's the same, I think, with leadership.
Got it. And how did you know when you were out of balance? What does that look like for you, just on a practical level? How does it feel either then or now?
Yeah, forever been practicing. I have practices, right? And there's things where I check in with myself every morning, like, how are we doing today? And sometimes I do it through journaling. I might do it through some movement practice, or, just see how my body's feeling. But I pay attention to this vehicle, so to speak, and just, it's like, oh, there's a lot of chatter going on here this morning, or wow, last night you're really working on that big. Like, what was all that anxiety about? That's So I just pay attention, and just about every morning there's a little micro adjustment that can take place that I appreciate.
Yeah, I remember you love trampolines and jumping.
I did. There's one way to shake it off, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, physically. So let's dive into COVID. What was that transition like for you? And I know that's where the book arose from. So just let's go back a couple of years now and look at that transition for you personally.
Yeah, like everyone, it was shocking, right? It's a shock to the system to think that all of a sudden there's something that could harm you or people you love. And I think it was more the people I love I was nervous about. I have people in my family who are immune suppressed and immune compromised or elderly, and like many of us, I just started having concerns. But it also shook up my work, of course. I was doing a lot of offsite and working with teams in person, and that all obviously stopped. What happened, though, was the intensity of the Zoom meeting, right? The one-on-one, people needed more. Like, all those leaders I was working with were in crisis. And so in a way, it was really good because I could not be in crisis at the same time, right? Like, I had them, or I could talk to them, work it through. And somehow, by sort of counseling or listening and working with somebody else, it always helped me a little bit more with my perspective, So that was...
I totally get that. And that's exactly why I do this work, because every time we do an interview or anything we work on, I get to go through the process as a guinea pig in a way, and it keeps me accountable and in integrity around this conversation. So I completely get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And showing up for others. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to do that, and to have people's confidence and to be able to really get in there and help shift the gears, it's privileged work. I feel very, very grateful for that. But the thing that happened during the pandemic is I realized that I was too limited in my outreach, right? If I could only help a certain number of people because there's only so many hours in my day or my capacity, that really prompted the book.
Got it. So talk to me about that inspirational moment of the book. Was it something you'd always wanted to do? Was it something that was living within you that you just needed that time period to just dive into?
What was amazing? I was so grateful for the quiet that came with the pandemic, right? So it did get quiet for a little bit. And in that stillness, I started to realize I had 20 years of material, of observation, of practice, of tools that I've been working with people, all over the world with. And I was like, there might be a method to this madness. And so that's where it started bringing it all together. It's like, well, what is the model? What's the mapping of all this? And how can I explain this in a way that I could offer it to somebody without having to be in the room with them? Or if I am in the room with them, they could have it for afterwards to help continue their journey.
Do you have a copy of the cover with you?
Yeah. We just said.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Empowerment amidst the chaos, master any moment with creativity and grace. It's such a first of all, it's a beautiful image. Tell us about this image.
Well, the thing that I realized is most of the trouble that we create for ourselves happens here. And most of the gifts and the beauty we have can happen here too, right? So trying to sort out the noise, separate yourself from the noise, and to find and then to drop in, right? So there's real harmony when we start to drop into our bodies and we drop into, I talk about multiple intelligences in the book. And our mind, our cognitive intelligence is so powerful and amazing, but it also is a little bit like you just don't want to be walking around a dark street with it at night alone. It can go crazy. Right? It can make up all sorts of things. So the thinking about how do we use our emotional intelligence and cultivate that? How do we use our physical intelligence? I know this is a part of your life of really being active and in nature and really, really appreciating that. Like, that's so important. And then a fourth intelligence, which I call subtle intelligence. And that is the realm of intuition and energetics and really where a lot of creativity can reside.
Yeah. And I love the title because I'm a huge supporter of empowerment. That's what this platform is all about. That's what our media work is all about. So people leave feeling empowered, not just dependent. I think that's a big difference. What is the chaos? What does that mean for you?
Well, the chaos for me in the way that I was thinking about it with this book kind of got ignited in 2016 on election night, right? And
I remember that night very well. We're all in shock. There's a big shock moment there too.
It was a big shock moment, and whether you were happy or outraged or whatever about it, what I realized is that paradigm shifts can happen quickly, and they were happening more and more. I've always kind of noted it, but I hadn't had such a visceral experience of like, wow, the world is not what we thought it was. It's changed, right? And then the pandemic kind of compounded that. AI is compounding that. Like everything that we keep, it's just quite remarkable. So the idea was, when we think about chaos, what we're really talking about is rapid unknown circumstances.
Rapid unknown circumstances affecting us directly.
Affecting us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do? That was my, what are we going to do?
And you could have approached that from climate change. You could have approached it from business. You could have approached it from politics. I mean, there's so many avenues, cultural separation and divide that we're living through.
Yeah.
Which focus do you want to put your lens on with this book?
Well, I always come back to the self, right?
Yeah.
Because the world is mad. Let's be for real. It always has been crazy. There's always been chaos. It's a natural part of life, right?
Yeah.
Without chaos, there's not order. If you have too much order, then it stagnates, right? So you need chaos. And our world has always been like that. And every generation probably has something that they fretted about. Whether it was like, I don't know, name a war that people went through, or a Cold War, whatever it was, people have always had something that represents chaos. And so when I think about that, and even when I think about within organizations, it's like, well, where is the power? Where do you have choice? Where do you have influence? And it's always within, right? Going back to those intelligences, that's all your realms of power. And have you harnessed those? Do you know how to use those?
Yeah. So when you talk, the byline of the book is master any moment with creativity and grace. So let's break down those words for a minute. First of all, mastering the moment. What is that like?
For me, that means presence.
Okay.
Right? Because most of the time, we're very busy thinking about something that just happened or something that's going to happen. Like, we're time travelers, right? We're really good at it, actually. And what we're not that efficient at is being present in the moment to take advantage of what's right there. And to be observant of what's right there and taking the data of what's right there. So master any moment is really about how do you bring yourself into the moment and create a perspective that allows you to have more choice.
Yeah. And the creativity, is that a part of the brain? Is that tapping into our four intelligences? Where does the creativity come from in your work?
So the creativity comes in any time you can gain perspective or data, right? Mm-hmm. And you can start to add to that. So I believe creativity happens in all those four intelligences, right? Like, there's people who can build things I could even dream of, right? Or even figure out how to put a frame together. Like, there's angles involved in, like, stuff I don't have a lot of physical intelligence when it comes to building, right? Or modeling or things like that. or there's extreme athletes or anybody who can really be in their body and they can have the intelligence. There's so much data in that. And when you understand that any of those areas, those 4 intelligent areas, can offer you information and perspective, then you can start getting creative with it. And if you're really good, for example, with the cognitive and the thinking, right? It's like you're picking up a violin and playing it. And you start picking up and adding some more instruments, the emotional intelligence, the subtle intelligence, the physical intelligence, then all of a sudden you start to have more information and possibilities come up. And that's a very creative act.
It's a great analogy because it actually reminds me of a band. Instead of playing a one instrument, you've now got, let's just use that metaphor. You have 4 instruments playing and it's a bigger sound. It's a more diversified, wider sound that could influence more people in different ways because it's not just the drums. It's not just guitar. It's like multiple different sounds playing in the band. And so what about grace? What does grace look like?
For me, I think you would use the word Zen, right?
Uh-huh.
So for me, grace is when you get to a place where, and in the book, I call it higher ground, right? It's the perspective when you have a little peace of mind and peace of heart around what's happening and you accept what you need to, you can act on what you want to, there's that place. It's a choice point where we can get into. But I think I loved the idea of grace because it can be interpreted a couple of ways. We can have grace ourselves and you can receive grace, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm not advocating anything religious, but I think I love the idea that you could have grace. Like you could go out into the woods and you can receive grace. You can be in a river and you receive grace. Like it's so wonderful to think there's just this supportive possibility for you.
I love it. I love it. So someone called your work a user guide and a life's instruction manual. Did you know that? So, that's in one of your reviews, life's instruction manual, which is a pretty awesome thing to put in a review, by the way, and a user guide. So who is the user guide for? I run a company, but I don't call myself I'm not a tech CEO or large company CEO. So who would you say this life instruction manual is for?
I really had 2 audiences. The first audience is leaders. Whatever, you're a leader. Anybody who is taking a stand, advocating for others, being of service, right? In my mind, you're leading. You're a leader in your community, in your work. Maybe you lead people, maybe you lead a company. Yeah. But the main thing was that, because I really want them to have some semblance of, balance and well-being. Wellness is really important to me for our leaders, people making big choices. You've seen examples of people who are not well and they're making really big choices for us.
Yes. You don't have to name anyone, but I know exactly what you mean.
Oh, there's plenty.
That's one audience. So the leaders is one audience. Who's the other audience?
My daughters. So their generation, right? So the generation of these kids who were affected by the pandemic, who were already, growing up with social media and figuring out how to live with that. They're on the edge. They're on a different edge than I was ever on, right? In terms of what they're facing. And I really wanted those young adults to have a way to navigate and to be able to ground themselves and go, no, that's that. And I know what that territory is because there's 8 different territories in my book. I know what that territory is. I know how to see it, name it, and I'm not going there today. Or if I'm deep in it, here's how I'm going to get out of it. And here's how I'm going to navigate.
It's fascinating. And I do think it will be called the COVID generation later in life when it's looking back, because it will have a profound effect on, like you mentioned, a pivotal moment in time as a shift, paradigm shift. And I think the Mayans, we thought it was going to be 2000. We prepared for that. Nothing happened. We thought it was going to be 2012 with the Mayan calendar. Nothing. It was 2020. So our number system was slightly off. And then it was a huge paradigm shift around the world. You also mentioned in your book, this is for brave souls, leaders, visionaries, and change makers. Talk to me a little bit about the bravery you've experienced in your work with your clients.
I think being to contemplate, to take time to reflect, to take time to look at yourself and to think about how can I be better, or how can I be more whole, or how can I be more compassionate or generous, or how can I serve better? Like, there's a lot of questions we can ask ourselves that, I lost myself. Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the bravery that you experience in the leaders, visionaries, and change makers. What does that look like? The bravery you've seen either in working with clients or your own journey?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that really came out of the pandemic, right? Because I saw a great divide happen. I saw leaders who were really put themselves out into the world to try to do the most they could to help, right? To be of service, or to definitely care for others, care for their organizations. They were able to drop into a place where they started thinking multidimensionally about all the factors at play. And they really gave it their best because they had their best to give. Right?
Heroic vision, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what I saw on the other hand are leaders who were not so brave, right? And leaders who, and I have compassion for these people. I'm not judging them for being right or wrong, but the circumstances overwhelmed them. And they either fell into depression. I saw that happen. I saw leaders who receded and wanted to wait to see what was going to, occur, who became a little more timid, who became very unsure. I saw leaders who didn't know how to operate in the unknown. And the amount of chaos that they were experiencing simply shut them down. So, and then, they weren't that excited about coming back out. Some have slowly of that group. But those who decided, oh my God, here we go. We're going to figure this out. Let's do it. If I can help them do what they're doing with more grace and more ease and a little maybe joy or just compassion or support, like I want them to know I see them.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And it's just such powerful work because by you influencing the leaders and working with those people at either end of the spectrum, right? They're getting a benefit that is top down and hopefully funnels down to every part of their organization, all their stakeholders and everyone, their clients and customers and everyone they're involved with. I love in the book how you broke down the chapters. So you mentioned territories. These, I just want to remind you, these could almost be cool band names. Like they're kind of cool names for your chapters. They could also, each one of them could be a band or a restaurant or a cafe or an event. Like you've come up and you're such a wordsmith around great naming of things. Just want to run through some of these for folks. The Quest Ion question, the Power Dome, Social Distortion, which is a band, Higher Ground, Shadowlands, Inspirata, and Mastering the Moment. I mean, like when I think of like great names out in the world, you really brought in some great names. So tell us a little bit about the framework and the territories.
Well, I will tell you right up front that they're not bands, but those are art installations. So each and every territory, so there's 8 of them, I've built interactive experiences for them. And obviously I couldn't do much with them over the last pandemic years, but that's what inspired it. So the territories are sort of patterns of thoughts and behaviors that I've watched people get into that either offered them a gift and offered the people they worked with a gift, or would take them out, right? So, for example, there's an area called the mists. And the mists are like literally when the fog starts coming in on you and you don't have clarity and you feel uncertain, you might feel overwhelmed, that there's a point in time where your negative thinking starts kicking in, and it's really a territory of disassociation. And also, I would call it perhaps depression could kick in. But what I noticed about that area, which affected a lot of people during the pandemic, is that it was accompanied by a lot of negative self-talk. So the territory has us look at our language and how we're talking to ourselves, and what do you do if you're, a terrible critic, meaning too harsh on yourself, and hence that'll translate to others, right?
So are
But
these places that we go in our mind, these territories, or places we live into? How do you describe them generally?
I would say they're experiences.
Experiences.
Well, the mist is an experience of this negative self-talk. If in Spirita, it is about the really inspiration, right? When we're communing with our muse and we're feeling flow and we're in a creative mode. That's what in Spirit is about. Shadowlands is when we find a blind spot or we're getting inhibited by a blind spot that we have that typically is closely related to something we're really good at, right? It can be the yin yang sort of a gift we have. But that blind spot, and when we're in the shadow, how do you get out? And if it's a really bad, what I talk about in the Shadowlands is when it gets really difficult, how do you reach out?
How do you get support? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big part of our platform. Yeah. We even have a crisis page for folks who are so deep in it. How do I get out of this? How do I get support? Because the illusion is I'm alone, right? No one's ever gone through what I've gone through. I can't relate. And I can imagine a lot of leaders, I've felt this as a leader. Who do I relate to? Because everyone is not experiencing this level of what I'm experiencing. So I'm alone, which feels isolation. And you go down that spiral cascade, and all of a sudden you don't know who to talk to or reach out to.
Right. And then you throw in social distortion, which is a real humdinger, right? Social distortion is things that we find on our social media and in our news. And anytime you're really out, it can be the values of our community. It could be the values of our family. They're beliefs that are going counter to your intuitive nature, right? So if you think you really should be doing something, or you get a sense of what's true for you, and it's not true for those around you, right? That's when we get a little bit distorted, and either we adapt to the majority, or we start those brave ones, right? When we were talking about, start looking at that and going, does that really serve us? I'm not so sure. Maybe we should do it different.
Asking good questions. I love the quest ion question because I'm a big fan of the hero's journey. We use that in a lot of media work. And so talk a little bit about the quest ion.
Well, I've always appreciated that people like to have a goal, right? And they'll say, oh, I have this project I want to do, or I have this dream, or I have this, name it, X, or I need to get out of a situation and it's this, I want to escape something. What I've found is more helpful than just going, all right, let's make a plan, or let's get a strategy, or set up some milestones, or et cetera, project plan, is to have inquiry be the guide. So how do you ask the right questions while you're, going towards something that allow you more, the right data, that collaborations you wouldn't expect, synchronicities that are delightfully unthought of, things, coincidence. How do you stay open while moving, in a direction versus being too focused and too obviously plans don't work, right? They can. I'm a big planner, so I'm not saying no to that. But we can't be wed to that, because obviously they get disrupted. That's what chaos is, right?
Yeah.
When something gets disrupted. So something you can count on is this sort of invisible line between you and your desire. That is this, open inquiry.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Talk to me a little bit about, this work is a journey. I think a lot of the times we get sucked into this mindset of like, oh, I'll do this thing and I'll be fine. I'll be whole. I'll be done. And it's a journey. It's a process. That's what we've always talked about in this work and my own work. So you pick up this book and it starts this journey, this question, this process. You're on this quest. Where do you want people to be after they leave the end of the book? What is next for them?
It's not an end game, right? Because if you notice with the map that I offer, the map of the territory, all the areas where people can go, and some of them, like the Power Dome, are wonderful places to go, right? In spirit of common ground, like things that you want to spend time there. It's a circular experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't end. It doesn't end. No.
And I noticed you put higher ground in the center. So is that about gaining perspective and having that moment of clarity and grace where you can actually choose to, oh, I need the power dome right now. This is a moment where I'm feeling either weakness or insecurity. Let me tap into my power dome. Is that a little bit of a metaphor of the way that to utilize the book?
Absolutely. So if you think about it as a map, and what you do is you formulate a quest, right? With a powerful question. It's like, how will I get my voice out into the world? How can I most effectively serve my community? How can I, what am I going to do after grad school? It's like whatever questions people are asking. How will I find a meaningful job or a relationship, whatever? There's a lot of questions. But once you have your question, higher ground is where you go to evaluate how you're doing on your quest, right? So not only do you formulate there, but I also give a tool of how to measure and navigate when you start to feel a little slippery. Or you wake up one morning and you're like, whoa, I had the worst nightmares. This was not a good day. And I'm so anxious about X, Y, or Z. Taking a look in the book and going, where am I in this territory? Oh, I've slipped into social distortion. All right, what do I want to do about that? And how am I going to navigate that? And just that amount of clarity to start with, can be really helpful. So higher ground is that place, sort of, think of it as headquarters, right? Yeah. You come back up and you get the nice view and you get to look around and you're like, what is actually happening today? And then you can decide what floor to go on to do whatever.
Yeah, choose and consciously choosing your direction. Like, okay, now I want to go into this path because this is what I need or support or want, and doing that. And so there's a part in the book where you mentioned chaos and changes can be befriended. Instead of the adversity model, the red ocean of adversity, how do we befriend chaos and changes in a way that's practical?
I think just knowing that you have a place to go, which might be this higher ground, right? Knowing that this territory that you're in, this life, has patterns to it. And I think also knowing that you're not alone. I'm a big advocate and fan of believing that everyone belongs, right? We all belong. And sometimes we're just not hanging out with the right people. Like if I'm hanging out with somebody, or if I'm in a company that is really in a territory I don't appreciate or isn't good for me, then I may need to extract myself and go to a territory that's better, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think life is just this amazing, amazing thing. I mean, this is the craziest experiment, right? It's like, let's put this little, whatever you want to call your spirit or your soul, or just this little spark of energy, right? We'll give it a zap. We'll put it into a human form, and then we'll let it loose for maybe 100 years, right? And see what happens. Yeah. It's crazy. And then put 8 billion other of those characters and see what they do, right?
And that's why I wanted to mention your customer service agent notifications. I don't want to give away too much. I want people to open the book and read these. They're so well done because we're also used to email, and they come in as an email structure, if I'm correct, or a company update or kind of memo. And the way that you frame things about Earth and sharing the Earth with 8 billion people and your journey walking into this Earth, just like you were mentioning, it's just fantastic. So how did that idea arise?
Well, it actually came from the art installations that I've been building. And what I realized, it was really much easier to capture somebody's imagination and get them to listen if it was playful, if it was somewhat imaginary, and yet you could hit home with it, right? You could always plant a little truth bomb in there, and they're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. It's a way to allow our mind to become less defensive. So that's, the creative approach allows for that. And the book, it is a story of a customer service agent who works for the universe in conversation with a human, right? And the human is just having a day and is finally happy to have somebody on the phone to talk to. What are you doing? Where's the manual?
So it's actually, it's a phone transcript, really, isn't it? Yeah.
whole thing is a transcript. So every chapter is just a different conversation between these two characters.
I love it. I love it. And it's
Yeah.
Lumi, correct? Is Lumi the name?
Yeah.
Well placed branding. I'm going to give you a nod for that one. Yeah, really like that. So we're wrapping up. You mentioned Earth as a distinguished department of the universe in that context, which is also so creative. I love the way you frame some of this and really different, especially in a world where you're working in a, highly typically corporate structure. To even bring up these terms and get people thinking outside that world is wonderful. But luckily, that world is bringing in this language and we're getting more in tune with that. It's not so separated from the natural world, which I love. So thank you. So just to wrap up, a journey intended is a journey well lived. I pulled that from your book. A journey intended, is that the conscious journey? Is that taking perspective? What describe that phrase to me?
Well, I think it means, mastering the moment, being present in the moment. And there's so much that we can, you could fall madly in love in the next 10 minutes. You don't know what's going to happen, right? Yeah. You can have a moment of awe or a miracle could happen before you, of the simplest type, where, you see a flower blooming, or there's all sorts of possibilities in our life. And I really appreciate that when we're trying to lead people, when we're building companies, entrepreneurs for sure, when you're building a company, you are laying the seeds down for what's going to happen. And the more conscious we can be, the more intentional, a journey intended, the better. And then, knowing when to let go and you don't have control. And sometimes you got to jump up to higher ground because it got a little crazy down there. And sometimes you have to go find your friends, and just knowing that this should be or can be, a life with grace and creativity in it. Then that is available to us. I've seen people under incredible duress find it. So
it's available to all of us, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of being available to all, hold up the book one more time. There we go. So head over to lumierework.com and check out Kathy's work, the book, and all the great things she's put out in the world. It's available on Amazon or wherever you buy books, the audiobook. What's your favorite way to engage with that book? Is it audio? I'm guessing it's the paper version. You can put notes and Post-its in there.
Yes, you can see that. I put that. I read it. But the book is designed for different learning types, right? So depending on how you like to read or learn, you can jump around, you can skip to this, to that, to that. Once you understand the basic territory, you can just pick this up. This could be bedside and you wake up and go, yep, that's what do we got?
Your life's instruction manual. So if anyone was asking, you now have life's instruction manual and we're all good. So no more questions needed there. You have it. So thank you so much. I feel like we could dive into any of those chapters and spend an entire hour diving into each one. Unfortunately, this platform doesn't offer that, but reach out to Kathy, grab the book on your favorite book site. And any last words of insight or inspiration you want to leave people today?
The one thing I would say is you can befriend chaos, right? And it's just a question of it's like a perfect stranger. You just don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes there's delight and surprise and amazing innovation that can come out of it. And when it's too much, you just need to be able to know where to go to settle things down and find your feet again, balance on the edge. That's basically what this is about, right?
I love it. It's a perfect synergy. And it reminds me of when you meet a stranger, there's an unknown opportunity there. So don't come at it with fear, come at it with openness and see what's possible. Thank you so much, Kathy. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've enjoyed this very much. Thank you.
Me too. So definitely head over to lumierework.com. Check out the new book, Empowerment Amidst Chaos. I'm excited to dive into it more. And thank you so much to Kathy for joining us. If you have any questions about any of the things we've covered, any of the topics you want to dive into, whether it's wellness, events, books, leadership, podcasts, media, definitely head over to zenhustlers.com, where we do try to support you to have balance on the edge. Thank you for watching us. Feel free to subscribe and refer our podcast to someone you may know in your lives that could use this work. And that's it. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us today.